Now, what the NDC did on Saturday is to give a clear signal one way or the other. So what the NDC did was to elect radicals. That's what they did. The delegates conference, its turnout and its outcomes, elected radicals for the party. Now, we're going to look at the historical outcomes of elections in Ghana, limiting ourselves tonight to the presidential election and determine whether radicalism is good this way or is bad that way. In politics, it depends on the time, the situation, and the circumstance. Radicalism that may be good today may not be good tomorrow. Radicalism that may not be good tomorrow may be good today. So when we finish the analysis, you can then put it in the box and make a determination whether radicalism will work for the NDC 2024 or not. And then we can also help you with that. So Johnson Adom-Otchere is an ultimate radical. What does radicalism mean? Now, a radical for a party just means that his politics, his ethos, appeals to the core members of the party. Now, every political party, really every organization has its radicals and its moderates. So MPP has radicals and moderates. The GOP in America has radicals and moderates. The Tory party in England has radicals and moderates. Every party has radicals and moderates. Okay, so the radical people in the NDC are those who appeal to the core NDC. The radical people in the MPP are those who appeal to the core MPP. That means if it's radical MPP, it is unlikely that he'll be able to convince a neutral voter or a voter that votes one way or the other every time to be able to vote for the MPP. A radical MPP person cannot convince a neutral person to vote for the MPP. MPP needs to rely on moderates to do that. Same with NDC. So as is Johnson Adom-Otchere, so is Chairman Wontumi. Both of them are radical, neck deep in the belly of their political parties and philosophy. So Adom-Otchere is appealing to NDC radical. It looks like if you look across board, the NDC elected all radical people. Let's go through. Johnson Adom-Otchere, congratulations to him. Yamin is another very, very radical NDC person. Now, Yamin is actually, his opponents even think that he's violent. I mean, we don't know that whether he's violent or not, but his opponents point to the fact that in 2016 he set up the Hawks and all of that. Now, who is Yamin? Yamin is a guy who was part of FONCA. What is FONCA? FONCA is Friends of Nana Kunedu Agyeman Rawlings. Now, this was formed in 2011, I believe, or 2010, 2011, at the time when Mrs. Rawlings decided to compete against Professor Mills for the flag bearership of the NDC. It was a very major epochal period in the history of the NDC when Flight Lieutenant Rawlings' position had become very nervous. His wife, dear wife and a big founder of the party, was now getting out of the party to set up her own party and to challenge Rawlings. Yamin was one of those who supported Nana Kunedu Agyeman Rawlings together with Owusu Bempah now at Ghana Gas and the Kofi Adams, all the FONCA. That's where Yamin actually came from. Okay, so when the FONCA thing didn't work, President Mahama, who was at that time vice president, I think sort of, sorry about that, sort of co-opted Yamin to come in. So that's really Yamin's background. He's that radical. He thinks of the party and he thinks of war. That's him. He also is in the belly of the NDC. So coming out of FONCA through to become a John Mahama ally and a John Mahama favorite. So he was kind of Rawlings, Mrs. Rawlings, and then he's turned around. His opponents also largely blame him for the division in Ashanti region that occasioned the NDC's defeat in 2016, because he became very powerful in Ashanti region. He was Deputy Minister of Youth and Sports during the World Cup 2014, all of that. So they put Yamin there to be the national organizer. That's almost like a call to real action bordering even on violence, because Yamin set up the Hawks. Okay, so that's another radical, confirmed. George Oparado, whose election actually went to court. There's a lot of confusion about that because he actually won the election by 25 votes in Cape Coast the week before last. After that, a legal action has been taken against him, and it appears that a court injunction had been obtained from the Ashaman High Court. However, he was sworn in on Saturday night by the National Democratic Congress executive in the presence of John Dramani Mahama, the same man they said he doesn't like him, etc., etc. So George Oparado's matter is yet to be fully discussed. But if you look at the context, you will consider George Oparado not so radical. Or how would you consider him? Because he grew up in a situation where he has friends across board and he's able to engage with other people outside the party. Maybe that's why he's not fitting into this particular executive. Maybe that's why they want him out. He doesn't really fit the radical brand. Okay, let's move on. Fifi Kwete, complete radical. Very clever man, I have to say. Very intelligent man, very clever man. But he's a die-in-the-wool radical. In fact, since he won the election on Saturday, if you have listened to his interviews on City FM and Joy FM yesterday, City TV, I should say, and Joy TV yesterday, he uses words like every rat knows that it was John Mahama and NDC that killed Dumso. and he's very vociferous in his outburst. You have to give him one thing. His loyalty to the NDC is big. And here on this program, we have an example about it. Many years ago, there was a program here, and the NDC rep did not show up. Okay, and then Fifi Kwete, who lived at least an hour drive away from our studios in Laboni, watching the program, decided to sit in his car. I still remember the car, the wine color car. He drove it to our office and he insisted that he wanted to be part of the program. We accepted, and he became part of the program, and he articulated quite well. So in terms of his loyalty to the NDC, and if you like, his dislike for the MPP, that's very obvious. Fifi Kwete also was the propaganda secretary of the party. And so his strength in communication is quite well known. In 2008, he set up what the MPP calls full of lies. His setting the record straight agenda. They bastardized Akufo-Addo, said all sorts of things about him that were not true in 2008. It was all led by Fifi Kwete. The propaganda seemed to have worked, because in 2008 election, the NDC eventually won it. And if you look at the results of the election, you will see that there was a lot of push for the NDC to win that election. And people like Fifi Kwete gained credit for that, for the setting the record straight agenda. So he's a radical. Remember, what's a radical? A radical is one who cannot convince another person to vote for his party. He appeals to the core of his party members. All right, let's move on. Sami Gyamfi, also, you see, he's a radical. Complete radical, and he also appeals to the core of the MPP support. So you're going to have a group of radicals who are now going to lead the NDC. Now, let's give you some analysis of Ghana's political outcomes of election results, and then you will see whether radical is good for the NDC or radical is good for the MPP, which we are discussing NDC tonight, though. So we are making the analysis that NDC's outcome of Saturday's elections was to elect radicals. What are the ramifications thereof of electing these radicals? We'll pick up some of those who were not elected, like Elvis Efiri Ankara, and discuss what his role would have been if he had been elected. We'll also talk about Samuel Ofusu-Ampofo. If he had been elected, how will the colorization, if you like, the sociological or socio-political colorization of the outcomes, how it will look like. So this is the map of 1992's election outcome. So in 1992, there were 10 regions in Ghana. Fly Lieutenant Rawlings, leading the NDC, won 57% of the elections, total 57%. Now, the NDC won in everywhere shaded green. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Of the, there were 10, so 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and where's the 9? Volta region is the 9. So NDC won 9 regions, MPP won 1 region, which is Ashanti region. MPP used to say that they won regional capitals. But with this kind of map, the NDC with Rawlings won 57% of the vote, and the MPP won a little over 40%. With 1 region. Okay, let's move on and see progressively what has been happening in presidential elections. All right, now this 1996, same kind of scenario occurs. In 1996, the same scenario occurs. Fly Lieutenant Rawlings wins about the same percentage, 57 point something, a little bit lower. The NDC wins, MPP wins 40%. From a core support base, they are drawing 40%. All right. 2000, the color completely changes. So even then, I believe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So MPP wins 6 regions, NDC wins 4. As you can see, as the map is showing, there's a growing MPP group, and they will attribute it to all kinds of transparent ballot box and all of that. That's the attribution they make. But the fact is that in 2000, the MPP group expanded. So with this, the MPP wins the first round of the election 48% by winning 6 regions. Okay, first round of election. Let's move on to 2004. 2004, the MPP by and large maintains that core group. And as it's turning around, Eastern Ashanti Bono-Ahafo is becoming the core group of the MPP. Okay, keep your eye on 2004. Have a look at it, soak it in, and let's go to 2008. And our analysis will begin over there. All right. Okay, so here is 2008. This is the big story. The MPP wins 2 regions and actually wins the presidential election, leading by 100,000, needing 25,000 to win after winning 2 regions. So I'm building up the story. So from 2008's map, and I'll pick up the other map so you see, what MPP needs to do to win is to have radical people to appeal to their core base, because it will appear that with their core base, they can win the election. With the NDC core base, can they win the election, or do they need a little bit more. When you look at that, then you make a determination whether electing leaders in the core, radical core, or electing leaders in the moderates is better or not. But you can also divide them. You can have your chairman radical, general secretary moderates. It depends on what the party is looking for. The reason why people like Chairman Wontumi continue to win elections in the NPP is that the NPP identifies that as far as they are concerned, they need to get out their core vote to win any election. Once they have their core vote, they will cross the 50% plus one. That's what you saw in 2008. With 2 elections, 2 regions out of 10, NDC won. Professor Mills had won 8 regions, and he was still trailing Nana Akufo-Addo by 100,000 votes in an election that MPP believed they did not perform well. You need to get that. In an election that MPP believed they did not perform, and I've interviewed Kofor and others who have talked about the performance of 2008, that it could have been better, etc. They were divided. They had 17 parliamentary candidates running as independent candidates all over the country, all over the place. There was a big division from the 17 candidates who contested the election. So in a divided MPP in 2008, winning 2 regions in the presidential ballot, they were leading by 100,000. So the MPP had learned since then that we always have to have a group of people who are in our core. Okay, now let's go back and look at the 2008 NDC group, those who were running the party. And it was Johnson Asiedu-Nkatia, and I believe the chairman, why you say they call him, Kwabena J. Okay, now who is Kwabena J? Kwabena J is an NDC moderate. Kwabena J is a UP guy. So let's get back to the story, that's the documentary we showed you ahead of the Congress. So Rawlings and his cohorts had all accepted that the chairmanship of the NDC should always go to the UP so that their chairman will be that kind of person who can talk to people outside the core PNDC, NDC group so that they can win elections. That's the philosophy of Rawlings and Co. That's why Isifu Ali and A.A. Munufi were chairman at the beginning. They were chairman for 10 years. Both of them are UP people, that is MPP people, who have become NDC, and they have friends all over, and they are seen not as core PNDC cadre people, but they are seen as moderates. That was the arrangement that they were doing then. Now, in 2008, Johnson Asiedu-Nkatia, the radical, was the general secretary of the party, and Kwabena J, who had been a member of parliament for the Popular Front Party, was the chairman. Kwabena J, you will say, is the guy who can talk to other people. And that is why Kwabena J was made majority leader at some point. In 1998-99, when there was a lot of pressure on the NDC group in parliament because J.H. Mensah and his minority were giving them a lot of hassle, the NDC under Rawlings decided to change the leadership of the party in parliament and have Kwabena J there, so that being a former PFP person, seeing J.H. Mensah on the other side, they will be able to judge in a certain way. So this map shows you that. Now, what happens in NDC elections 2008? The candidature of NDC elections in 2008, Professor Mills and John Dramani Mahama, at that time, both of them will be said to be moderates of the NDC. So I'm bringing you to how come that 2008 was won in these circumstances. NDC had represented themselves in a mix of radical and moderate at the helm of affairs. So Kwayose, who is chairman, Kwabena J, is a moderate. Johnson Asiedu-Nkatia is a radical, and he was appealing to the core party, and Wayose was appealing to the broader group outside the party to accept President Mahama and President Mills. And President Mahama and President Mills themselves were not said to be core NDC people, particularly John Mahama, the running mate. He came onto the ticket because his supporters felt that it is important that we present candidates who have open arms to the rest of the world. Give me the photograph of John Mahama and President Mills, and then I can illustrate that point. So yes, that's what happened. So this is President Mahama and President Mills. Now, both men on the 2008 ticket were not thought to be radical NDC people. They were thought to be moderate. Particularly John Mahama was thought to be very moderate, and that he could accept people could run to him who were not NDC. Same with Professor Mills. It was thought that people could run to him who were not NDC. And how did it happen? When Professor Mills became president, he made appointments of people like Kwabena Dufo and others who were not thought to be members of the core cadre NDC. What did Professor Mills do? He also brought on board, at that time, he was able to go out of himself to bring on board people who had fallen out with the party, because with the NDC, you need to amalgamate all the minds and hearts and support to be able to win the presidential elections. With the MPP, they need to appeal to their core support base. If they can do that successfully and there are no internal quibbles in their party, most likely they have the numbers to win. But that will also reflect the global situation of right-wing and left-wing political parties. In many of the established democracies, you will see that the right wing, if they're able to get their base out, they win the election. The reason why Biden had won the election in 2020 was that the Republican Party was divided. Whenever the Republican Party is united around one candidate, just sweep the election out. They always win because they have the numbers to do so. The Democratic Party either must use a superstar candidate or they must benefit from something that is dividing the Republican Party. Now, when you look at the history of the Democratic Party in America, you will see, apart from Biden in recent times, they have always fielded what you call a superstar candidate, perhaps Biden and Carter. But if you look at their big stories, Kennedy in 1960, Obama, Clinton, these are superstar candidates. And that's how they have been winning the elections in America most of the time. Superstar candidates, moderate candidates, and you have to have, or you must have some confusion in the Republican Party, or a combination of all of these factors will put the left-wing party into office. So it's very similar in Ghana. So in 2008, you had these two men, both of whom were thought as radical. Okay, move on to the 2016 map, and then let's look at the analysis. Move on to the 2016 map, and then we'll deal with it. So they're going to get us, they're moving the map forward, and they're going to the 2016 map, and we will understand from the 2016 why this analysis is important. So 2012 was the next one. 12, yes, correct. Give me 2012. Okay, so here is 2012 again. In 2012, John Dramani Mahama wins a first round election. Of course, MPP will say 2012 was this and that because the court said this and that. Fair enough, but we can analyze the data anyway. It still fits into our analysis. So here is Akufo-Addo again, on the MPP again. In 2012, winning 2 regions, John Mahama winning 8 regions out of 10, but winning the elections only marginally. John Mahama won 50% point something. Very marginally. But if you look at a 10-region country and you have won 8 regions, you should be having a resounding victory. You should not be having a marginal victory. Never mind that it's a majority vote of 50+1. But it's marginal, you see. Now, even when your opponent is winning 2 regions. So that emphasizes the point that with the MPP, you need to appeal to your core support. If you can get your core support working, you win the election. Let's move on to 2016 and see what happened in 2016's elections. And then we can come back and talk about the nature of the MPP, of the NDC list now. So this is 2016's elections. Okay, so in 2016, the MPP move up and they add Central Region, Greater Accra Region, Bono Ahafo Region, and guess what happens? With MPP winning 5 regions out of the 10, they get a whooping 1 million difference of the votes. NDC wins 8 regions out of 10, they are winning marginally or they are even losing. MPP wins 6 regions, they've cleaned it up. So that means the two parties have their work cut out for them. MPP must go to their base and get them united and work for them. NDC must have people in their front line that are moderates, like we saw in 2008. They had 2 presidential candidates, both of whom were thought to be moderate. And so they were able to appeal to the moderate candidates. The MPP was having infighting in its party with 17 candidates, etc., etc. That situation led NDC to win 8 regions out of 10. Even there, Akufo-Addo was leading and needed 25% to just clinch the presidential, needed 25,000 votes out of 9 million people who had voted to clinch the presidential victory. He didn't get it. Okay, let's move on to 2020 and then we'll come back and do the analysis. Okay, so now this is 2020's map. Now it's 16 regions. Okay, let's see what happens. So NDC is green. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Of the 16 regions in 2020, NDC actually win 9 regions, yet they are defeated by 500,000. That's the data. So as I'm saying, we're not going to say all, but we are saying some so that you can analyze it yourself. So you will see from analyzing this data that NDC always need a core, the MPP always need their core votes to win. NDC need to have moderate people so they can bring other people who are neither NDC or MPP to add to their votes, and then they can cross the line and be elected as a political party. What happened at the stadium looks like they have gone for the radical. Let's look at the presidential ticket combination of the NDC now. Professor Nana Opoku-Agyeman and John Dramani Mahama, and they showed up at the stadium together, didn't they? And so we know that it's a ticket that President Mahama is still thinking about. Now, if you consider that the NDC has elected radicals, and get ready with Elvis Efrie Ankra's photograph, I need to say something about him. If you consider that NDC has elected radicals, then you come and look at the presidential ticket. Would you consider them as radical, or will you consider them as moderate? John Dramani Mahama, the former president, would have started in 2008 on the running mate ticket as a moderate. Over the years, he has shifted from moderate to become core radical NDC. His support base right now is drawn from the radical NDC, which I can believe within the NDC will be more. For every political party, the radical group is always more. So that radical group within the NDC is where John Mahama is getting his strength from right now. Those who believe that it has been him and him alone, nothing else, nothing more, nothing else. I'll come back to the Victor Smith story and explain to you what Victor Smith is trying to challenge. We'll deal with that. So President Mahama, I will say that he's no longer a moderate, he's now a radical in the NDC. Let's shift to the running mate, but you can express your views as well. That's mine. You can express yours as well. Professor Nana Opoku-Agyeman will be ordinarily seen as a moderate, a university professor, first female vice chancellor of Cape Coast University. All of that is giving her a moderate look. Even when she becomes Minister for Education under President Mahama, she's by and large moderate. The question is she still moderate such that she can draw the votes of those NDC people who don't like John Mahama, or those who are outside the NDC who are neither NDC or MPP? Will they vote for the ticket because of Nana Opoku-Agyeman? Does she stand in the same position as John Dramani Mahama was standing in 2008, where it was really obvious? It is still a case that the NDC's 2008 victory was largely occasioned by the inclusion of John Mahama on the ticket. There's a philosophy like that. There are people who believe in that. Some don't believe it, but it is a very competitive analysis. That theory is very, very competitive. That John Mahama's addition to the ticket was the reason why Professor Mills was able to cross the line in those difficult circumstances. So that the 25,000 votes that eluded Akufo-Addo to win 2008 election will be attributed to the presence of John Mahama on the ticket, because at that time he was thought to be moderate. Young people liked him. People who didn't like politics liked him. People who didn't like dirty politics liked him. People who thought politicians are insulting each other liked him, because he was the decent politician, moderate, put on the ticket by the Ahoy people, and all the right-thinking NDC members felt that going into this election, we have Professor Mills as a moderate, we need another moderate. There were those who thought that Professor Mills is a moderate, let's get a radical in there. And there were those who said, no. We already have enough. Let's get the moderates in and win this election. And that's what happened. Now, the question I'm leaving you with, viewers, is that Nana Opoku-Agyeman, Professor Nana Opoku-Agyeman, would you consider her a moderate, or would you consider her a radical? If you give me the answer, then you can answer the question yourself.
Arise for Ghana, of the land, forward and seek your future, development our God, from victory to victory, the NDC shall lead, able Democrat, Ghana, our strength in unity, from victory to victory, the NDC shall lead, able Democrat, Ghana, our strength in unity. Victory is our land. Victory is our land. GEG is a winner. for Ghana, of the truck of the land. When and secure future, development, our goal, compete to be free. The NDC shall lead stable democrat. Ghana, our strength.